How old is he? The question cut through the warmth of the small veterinary clinic like a blade through silk. Clara Whitmore stood frozen in the doorway of her office, a patient file clutched against her chest, watching the man she had spent 6 years avoiding stare at her son through the waiting room window. Nathaniel. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. This is not the place. He did not turn to face her. His expensive overcoat was still dusted with January snow, his posture rigid as stone, his entire being focused on the small boy arranging wooden animals on the floor with methodical precision. How old is he, Clara? She could feel her veterinary assistant Margaret watching from behind the reception desk, could sense the tension spreading through the room like ripples across still water. Thomas looked up briefly, his grey eyes curious about the stranger blocking the doorway, then returned to his careful arrangement of horses and cows. Those eyes. Those exact grey eyes that had once looked at her across a crowded conference room and changed everything she thought she knew about love. 5.5, she said. She watched him calculate. Watched 6 years of assumptions and carefully constructed beliefs crumble across his features in the space of a single breath. When he finally turned to face her, she saw something she had never witnessed in all their time together. Nathaniel Pierce, the man whose empire spanned 3 continents, looked utterly lost. He is mine. It was not a question. Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are at. If you are new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever. Clara felt every muscle in her body tense as she glanced toward Thomas, still absorbed in his wooden animals, still blissfully unaware that the foundations of his small world were about to shift. She forced her voice to remain steady, professional, the same tone she used when delivering difficult news to worried pet owners. My office. Now. She turned without waiting for his response, walking the familiar path past the examination rooms, past the surgery suite, to the small office at the back of the clinic where she had built a life from the ashes of everything she had run from. Her hands trembled as she set the file on her desk. Behind her, she heard the door close with a soft click. 6 years, Clara. His voice filled the cramped space, and suddenly she was acutely aware of the contrast between them. Her practical veterinary scrubs against his tailored wool coat. Her modest mountain town office against the world of private jets and international acquisitions he now commanded. The woman she had become against the girl who had once believed love was enough. 6 years you let me believe you simply vanished. 6 years you kept my son from me. You have no right to stand in my clinic and make accusations. She turned to face him, drawing on every ounce of composure she had cultivated since leaving Boston. No right. I called you 19 times over 3 weeks after I left. 19 times, Nathaniel. Do you know what your assistant told me the last time? That you were unavailable for personal matters until the Series B funding closed. That personal calls were being screened and redirected. Something flickered across his face. Pain, perhaps. Or simply the discomfort of being confronted with facts he could not dispute. I was building something important. You were always building something important. She heard the bitterness in her own voice and hated it. There was always another property, another investor, another opportunity that could not wait. I was not asking you to choose between me and your company. I was asking for a return phone call. So you decided I did not deserve to know about my own child. The accusation hung between them, sharp and unavoidable. Through the wall, Clara could hear Thomas asking Margaret something about the animals, his small voice bright with the uncomplicated joy of childhood. I decided my child deserved a parent who would put him first. Completely. Not when it was convenient. Not between acquisitions. Always. And you thought I could not be that parent. I thought you had already decided you could not be. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Clara watched Nathaniel's jaw tighten, watched his hands curl into fists at his sides, watched the legendary control that had built an empire struggle to contain whatever storm raged beneath his composed exterior. What is his name? The question came out rough, stripped of anger, carrying only the raw weight of loss. Thomas. His name is Thomas. Something in Nathaniel's expression cracked, and for a moment Clara saw not the powerful CEO but the young man she had fallen in love with 7 years ago. The one who had talked about wanting a family someday, about breaking the cycle of workaholism that had destroyed his own father. The one who had made promises in the dark that the daylight always seemed to erase. Thomas, he repeated softly, as if learning a word in a new language. Thomas. A knock at the door made them both start. Margaret's apologetic face appeared in the gap. "I am sorry to interrupt, Dr. Whitmore, but Thomas is asking for you. He wants to show you the barn he built." Clara nodded, grateful for the interruption even as it forced the conversation toward an impossible conclusion. "I will be right there." After Margaret withdrew, Nathaniel spoke again. "I am not leaving this town without my son knowing who I am. You cannot simply appear in his life and announce yourself. He is 5 years old. His entire world is small and stable. I will not let you shatter that because it fits your schedule. Then we do it carefully. Gradually. But we do it, Clara. I have missed 5 years. I will not miss another day." She should have refused. Should have demanded lawyers, mediators, the full protection of a legal system designed to handle exactly this kind of situation. But looking at him now, seeing the desperate need beneath his controlled exterior, she found herself making a different choice. 1 month. Give me 1 month to prepare him. You may visit as a friend, someone important from my past. Nothing more until I decide he is ready. Nathaniel studied her face, clearly weighing whether to push for more. His entire career had been built on pressing advantages, on recognizing leverage and using it. She waited for him to deploy those same tactics here. Instead, he simply nodded. 1 month. But I want to see him regularly. I want to understand what I have missed. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a business card, placing it precisely on her desk. The simple cream-colored card read only his name and a phone number. No title. No company logo. As if he wanted to strip away everything that had come between them. "I am staying at the Morrison Inn on the edge of town. Call me when you are ready for the first visit." After he left, Clara sank into her desk chair, staring at the card like it might spontaneously combust. Through the thin walls, she could hear Thomas's voice rising with excitement as he described his wooden animal barn to Margaret. Her son. Their son. The secret she had kept for 6 years, now crumbling in her hands. She picked up the photograph beside her computer. Thomas at the lake last summer, his gap-toothed smile radiant as he held up a small fish he had caught. Just the two of them in the frame, as it had always been. As it would never be again. That evening, after Thomas was asleep with his stuffed bear tucked under one arm and his wooden horse clutched in his fist, Clara sat alone in the quiet of her living room and allowed herself to remember. She had met Nathaniel Pierce 7 years ago, at a veterinary conference in Boston where she was presenting research on surgical techniques for large animals. He had been there scouting properties for what would become the first of his boutique hotels, and their paths had crossed in the lobby bar when she ordered the same obscure bourbon he was drinking. He was 31 then, intense and driven, already successful but not yet the industry titan he would become. She was 27, idealistic and ambitious, convinced that hard work and passion could solve any problem. They talked until the bar closed, then walked through the autumn streets until dawn painted the sky pink. 3 months later, she moved into his Boston apartment. 6 months after that, she realized she had made a terrible mistake. It was not that he did not love her. She still believed, even now, that he had loved her in his way. But his way meant cancelled dinners and forgotten promises. His way meant waking at 2 in the morning to find his side of the bed empty and the blue glow of his laptop illuminating the living room. His way meant hearing him tell his business partner on a phone call that personal commitments would never be allowed to interfere with company objectives. She had tried to talk to him about it. Tried to explain that she was not asking him to choose between her and his dreams, only to make room for both. He had nodded, apologized, promised to do better. And for a week or two, things would improve. Then another acquisition would demand his attention, another investor would require cultivation, and she would find herself eating dinner alone again, wondering when she had stopped being a priority and started being an obligation. The night she left, he was on a video call with his team in Singapore, planning the rollout of their Geneva property. She packed her suitcase in the bedroom, taking only what she had brought into the relationship, leaving behind the jewelry he had given her, the clothes he had bought. When she walked past the living room with her bag, he did not even look up. She drove through the night, checking into a motel somewhere in Connecticut, and slept for 14 hours. When she woke, she felt lighter than she had in months. Free. Finally. Blessedly free. 2 weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. Clara rose from the couch and walked to the window, staring out at the snow-covered mountains that had become her sanctuary. She had tried to call him 19 times over 3 weeks, just as she had told him. Each time, his assistant had offered the same polite deflection. Mr. Pierce is in meetings. Mr. Pierce is traveling. Mr. Pierce has asked that personal calls be directed elsewhere during this critical period. The last time she called, she had not even identified herself. Just asked, one final time, if there was any way to reach him directly. I am afraid not, the assistant had said, her tone professionally sympathetic. Is there something I can help you with? No, Clara had replied. There is nothing anyone can help with. She had hung up the phone and made her decision. Her child would not grow up wondering why their father never came to school plays. Her child would not learn to interpret the glow of a laptop screen as a signal that they mattered less than a spreadsheet. Her child would have a parent who was fully present, completely dedicated, always there. She changed her name professionally, using her mother's maiden name. She moved to this mountain town where no one knew her, where Pierce Hospitality had no properties, where she could build a new life from scratch. She opened her veterinary clinic, established her practice, and prepared to raise her child alone. And then she met Henry. Clara's hand moved unconsciously to her left ring finger, where a simple gold band still rested. Henry Whitmore had been a high school history teacher, 10 years her senior, with kind eyes and gentle hands and absolutely no ambition beyond being good at his job and present in his life. He had brought his elderly golden retriever to her clinic with a case of arthritis that needed managing, and he had asked her to dinner with a directness that disarmed her completely. I am pregnant, she had told him on their third date, certain it would end things. The father is not in the picture. Henry had simply nodded, taken a sip of his coffee, and asked when she was due. They married when Thomas was 3 months old. Henry had adopted the boy legally, giving him his name, loving him with a completeness that still made Clara's chest ache when she thought about it. Thomas called him Daddy, learned to walk holding his hands, fell asleep every night to the sound of his voice reading stories. When Thomas was 3, Henry's heart had given out without warning. A genetic defect no one knew about, the doctors said. A ticking clock that ran out too soon. Clara had buried her husband and raised her son and never once regretted the choice she had made to protect him from a father who could not be present. Until today. She looked at Nathaniel's business card, still sitting on the kitchen counter where she had placed it. Tomorrow she would call him. Tomorrow she would begin the process of dismantling the life she had built, piece by careful piece, to make room for a man she no longer knew. Tonight she would sit with the weight of everything she had done and try to convince herself it had been right. The first meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the Natural History Museum in the nearby city. Neutral ground, Clara had insisted. Somewhere Thomas felt comfortable, where the presence of a stranger would seem natural rather than intrusive. She had not slept well all week. Every night, she lay awake imagining disaster scenarios. Nathaniel demanding custody. Nathaniel whisking Thomas away on a private jet. Nathaniel using his billions to hire lawyers who would bury her in litigation until she had nothing left. The fears were irrational, she knew. He had shown no indication of wanting to take Thomas from her. But 6 years of carefully maintained control were crumbling, and with them went her ability to pretend she had any power over what happened next. Thomas was vibrating with excitement as they parked outside the museum. He loved this place, had been coming here since he was old enough to walk, knew the location of every dinosaur skeleton and mineral display by heart. Someone is meeting us here, Clara told him as they walked toward the entrance. An old friend of Mommy's. He is very nice, and he wanted to meet you. Does he like dinosaurs? I think he might. You can show him your favorites. She spotted Nathaniel waiting near the ticket counter, dressed down in dark jeans and a simple blue sweater that matched his eyes. He had left behind the expensive coat, the power accessories, the visual markers of his status. To anyone watching, he might have been any other weekend visitor waiting for friends. His eyes found Thomas immediately, and Clara watched something in his expression soften in a way she had never seen during their time together. Hunger and tenderness and something that might have been grief, all mixed together in the moment before he composed himself and turned to greet them. Hello, he said, crouching down to Thomas's eye level. You must be Thomas. Your mother has told me a lot about you. Thomas studied him with the serious evaluation he gave all new people. He was not a child who warmed quickly, and Clara felt a twist of protective anxiety as she waited for his verdict. "Your eyes are the same color as mine," Thomas observed finally. The words landed like a physical blow. Clara saw Nathaniel's composure waver, saw him struggle to find a response that would satisfy a child's curiosity without revealing too much. "Sometimes people can have similar features without being related," Clara interjected smoothly. "Like how your friend Marcus has brown hair just like yours." Thomas considered this, then apparently filed it away for later analysis. He turned back to Nathaniel with the abrupt subject changes that characterize conversations with 5-year-olds. "Do you want to see the T-Rex? It is the biggest one." "I would like that very much." Thomas took off toward the dinosaur hall, and Clara and Nathaniel followed at a more measured pace. She was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the familiar scent of cedar that had once meant home, the way his stride unconsciously matched hers. "He is remarkable," Nathaniel said quietly. "So serious. So precise. He gets that from you." The words escaped before she could stop them, an admission she had not intended to make. Nathaniel glanced at her, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "Does he? What else?" "The way he concentrates. The patience he has for building things. He will spend hours on a project, testing each piece before committing to it." Clara found herself offering more than she had planned. He taught himself to read simple words from street signs before he started preschool. Refused any help. Just studied them until he figured it out. "I was the same way." Nathaniel's voice was rough. "My mother used to say I was the most stubborn child she had ever encountered." She meant it as a compliment. Thomas was waiting for them impatiently by the towering T-Rex skeleton, already launching into an explanation of why this particular dinosaur was scientifically superior to all others. Nathaniel listened with complete attention, asking questions, following up on details, engaging with a focus that Clara recognized from his business dealings but had rarely seen directed toward anything personal. For the next 2 hours, she watched her son and his father circle each other like wary animals establishing territory. Thomas gradually relaxed, drawn in by Nathaniel's genuine interest and willingness to follow wherever his enthusiasm led. By the time they reached the geology exhibit, Thomas was voluntarily reaching for Nathaniel's hand to drag him toward a display of volcanic rocks. "Look at this one. It has crystals inside. Mrs. Patterson says they form when the lava cools slowly. She sounds like an excellent teacher." "She is okay." Thomas tilted his head, considering. "She does not know as much about dinosaurs as she thinks she does." Nathaniel's laugh caught Clara off guard. It was unrehearsed, genuine, completely unlike the polished social laughter she remembered from their years together. Thomas grinned up at him, pleased to have earned the reaction. "We should get lunch," Clara said, checking her watch. "Thomas, are you hungry? Can Nathaniel come too?" She looked at Nathaniel, who was carefully maintaining a neutral expression, clearly leaving the decision entirely in her hands. "If he would like to." The diner Thomas chose was a predictable selection, a family-run establishment where they knew his name and his standing order. He led Nathaniel to his favorite booth and launched into an explanation of why the chocolate chip pancakes here were superior to all other pancakes in existence. Clara sat across from them, watching Nathaniel listen to her son with the same intensity he had once applied to investor presentations. He remembered details Thomas mentioned, asked follow-up questions that proved he was actually paying attention, never once glanced at his phone despite the muffled buzzing from his pocket that indicated incoming messages. This was not the man she had left. Or perhaps it was a version of him she had never been allowed to see. Someone underneath all the ambition and drive, someone who might have existed all along if only there had been space for him to emerge. "Can I get more syrup?" Thomas asked, having thoroughly demolished his pancakes. "You have enough sugar in your system to power a small city," Clara said mildly. "Please." She nodded, and Thomas bounded off toward the counter, where the owner was already reaching for the syrup bottle with a knowing smile. "He is extraordinary," Nathaniel said in the sudden quiet. "Intelligent. Curious. Completely unafraid to state his opinions. He gets that from his father too." The words hung between them, the first direct acknowledgement she had offered. Nathaniel looked down at his coffee cup, and when he looked up again, his eyes were bright. "I missed so much." "I know. First steps. First words. First day of school." "I know." He was silent for a moment, visibly struggling to contain whatever emotion was threatening to break through his composure. "I am not angry," he said finally. "I mean, I am. Of course I am. But underneath that, I understand why you left. The man I was then, the man you knew, he would have been a terrible father. Too distracted. Too consumed by the next achievement to appreciate what was right in front of him. The admission startled her. She had expected accusations, justifications, an itemized list of everything she had taken from him. Not this quiet acknowledgement of his own failures. What changed? Losing you. He met her eyes directly. I told myself I was fine. Told myself you were the one who gave up, who could not handle the demands of being with someone ambitious. I threw myself into the company harder than ever. And then one night, about 3 years after you disappeared, I was sitting in a hotel room I had just purchased in Geneva. The acquisition I chose over us. And I realized I had everything I ever wanted and absolutely nothing that mattered. Thomas was returning from the counter, syrup bottle in hand, and Nathaniel composed himself with visible effort. Mrs. Chen says you are very handsome, Thomas reported matter-of-factly. She wants to know if you are single. Nathaniel choked slightly on his coffee. Clara found herself fighting a smile despite everything. Tell Mrs. Chen I appreciate the compliment. Are you single, I mean? The directness of childhood struck again. Nathaniel glanced at Clara, then back at Thomas. I suppose I am. Mommy is single too. Thomas began drowning his remaining pancake bits in syrup. Except she was married before. To my dad. But he is in heaven now. The table went quiet. Clara watched Nathaniel absorb this information, watched him recalibrate his understanding of the past 6 years. I am sorry to hear that, Nathaniel said carefully. He sounds like he was a wonderful person. He was. Thomas nodded, seemingly unbothered by the topic. He used to read me stories every night. Now Mommy does it, but she does not do the voices as good. Thank you, sweetheart. Clara reached over to ruffle his hair. We should get going soon. Nathaniel probably has things to do. But Nathaniel was looking at her with something new in his expression. Awareness, perhaps. Recognition that her life had contained entire chapters he knew nothing about. That the woman sitting across from him was not the girl he remembered, but someone shaped by experiences and losses he was only beginning to understand. Actually, he said, I cleared my schedule for the day. If there is anything else Thomas would like to show me. The afternoon stretched into early evening. Thomas led them on a tour of his favorite spots, the bookstore where the owner let him read in the corner, the park with the old wooden playground, the ice cream shop that made its own waffle cones. Nathaniel followed wherever the boy led, patient and present in a way Clara still could not quite reconcile with her memories. By the time they returned to her car, Thomas was fading, his earlier energy giving way to the droopy-eyed exhaustion of a child who had been too excited to rest. Say goodbye to Nathaniel, Clara prompted. Goodbye. Thomas looked up at him with sleepy seriousness. Are you going to come back? The question held more weight than a 5-year-old could possibly understand. Clara saw Nathaniel struggle with how to answer, saw him choose his words with unusual care. I would like that very much. If that is okay with your mom. Thomas turned his expectant gaze to Clara, and she felt the trap close around her. There was no way to refuse without explaining why, and no explanation that would make sense to a child who had simply enjoyed a pleasant afternoon with a friendly adult. We will see, she said, the eternal parental deflection. Come on, sweetheart. Time to get you home. She buckled Thomas into his car seat and closed the door, then turned to find Nathaniel standing a careful distance away, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Thank you, he said. For today. For letting me begin to know him. This does not change anything. The words came out harsher than she intended. One good afternoon does not erase the reasons I left. I know. And I am not ready to tell him who you really are. He has been through enough without having his entire understanding of his life appended. I know that too. She waited for him to push back, to invoke his rights, to remind her of the leverage he could easily deploy. Instead, he simply nodded. I meant what I said at the diner. I understand why you left. I understand why you did not tell me. The man I was then had not earned the right to be anyone's father. And the man you are now. He looked at her steadily, snow beginning to dust his shoulders, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The man I am now is willing to prove himself. However long it takes. Whatever you need. She drove home in silence, Thomas asleep in the backseat, her thoughts churning with everything she had witnessed. The Nathaniel she had known would never have spent an afternoon following a 5-year-old through dinosaur exhibits and bookstores. Would never have admitted fault, accepted limitations, demonstrated patience. People could change. She knew this. Henry had shown her this. But could they change enough? And even if they could, did that erase the harm they had caused? She had no answers. Only questions that would keep her awake long into the night. The weeks that followed established a pattern Clara had not anticipated. Nathaniel appeared twice, sometimes 3 times a week, always following her lead, always respecting the boundaries she set. He joined them for Saturday museum trips and Sunday afternoon hikes. He showed up at Thomas's school concert and sat quietly in the back row. He learned Thomas's favorite foods, his bedtime routines, the stories he liked to hear. More disturbing were the nightly text exchanges. It had started innocuously enough. After the first few visits, Nathaniel had asked if she would mind sending him updates on days when he could not see Thomas. Just small things, he said. Photos or stories. Anything to help him feel connected. She had agreed, telling herself it was for Thomas's benefit. That a father, even an absent one, deserved to know his child. But the messages had evolved into something else. Late at night, after Thomas was asleep, she found herself reaching for her phone to share the small moments of her day. Thomas insisting his vegetables be arranged in a specific pattern. Thomas explaining with great seriousness why blue was objectively the best color. Thomas falling asleep on the couch with his wooden horse still clutched in his fist. Nathaniel's responses came back thoughtfully, sometimes immediately, sometimes in the small hours of morning when he must have been unable to sleep. He arranges things the way I used to. Everything in its proper place. My mother said it was how I made sense of the world. I preferred green as a child. But I respect his conviction. I used to sleep with a wooden train my grandfather carved. Still have it somewhere. The intimacy of these exchanges unsettled her. They were sharing pieces of themselves they had never offered during their actual relationship, finding connections across the distance that had always existed between them. One night, around 3 in the morning, a message arrived that made her sit up in bed. I have not told you about my father. About why I became the way I was. She stared at the screen, watching the 3 dots appear and disappear as he typed and deleted and typed again. He built a construction company from nothing. Worked constantly. I barely saw him growing up, but I understood that work was what kept our family fed and housed. Then when I was 15, the company went bankrupt. Bad investments, a partner who embezzled, a recession that hit at exactly the wrong time. He lost everything. The dots appeared again. Then the second message. He never recovered. Not financially, but emotionally. He just disappeared inside himself. Stopped talking. Stopped engaging. My mother essentially raised me alone while he sat in his chair and stared at the walls. He died when I was 23. Heart failure, but really he had been gone for years. Clara read the words twice, a new understanding crystallizing. I swore I would never be that vulnerable. The next message read. Never build anything that could crumble. Never love anything more than my ability to protect it. I thought I was being strong. Turns out I was just terrified. She did not know how to respond. This was more honesty than Nathaniel had offered in their entire relationship, more insight into the walls he had constructed than she had ever been permitted to see. Finally, she typed the only thing that felt true. Thank you for telling me. His response came quickly. Thank you for listening. I never told anyone that before. Not my business partners. Not the therapist I started seeing last year. Just you. She set the phone down and stared at the ceiling until dawn. 2 months after that first museum visit, Thomas started asking questions Clara had been dreading. Is Nathaniel going to keep coming to see us? They were eating dinner, pasta with the specific sauce Thomas preferred, at the small kitchen table that had witnessed 1,000 ordinary moments. He seems to enjoy spending time with you. But is he going to stay? Thomas poked at his pasta, not meeting her eyes. People leave sometimes. Like Daddy did. Even when they do not want to. The knife in her chest twisted. Oh, sweetheart. I know Daddy did not want to leave. Thomas's voice was matter-of-fact in the way children learn to be when they had processed difficult truths too young. But he's still left. And I want to know if Nathaniel is going to leave too. Clara set down her fork, giving her son her full attention. He is not going anywhere, sweetheart. He cares about you very much. Like a friend. Like a friend. Thomas considered this, still pushing pasta around his plate. But he looks at me different than friends look at people. Like he is trying to remember something important. Out of the mouths of babes, Clara thought. Out of the mouths of children who saw more than adults ever gave them credit for. Nathaniel knew me a long time ago, she said carefully. Before you were born. Seeing me again probably brings back a lot of memories. Is that why he looks at you funny too? Does he look at me funny? Thomas nodded seriously. Like he wants to say something but he does not know the words. Clara had no response for that. She redirected the conversation to school, to friends, to the normal concerns of a 5-year-old's life. But the observation lingered long after Thomas was asleep. Nathaniel looked at her like he wanted to say something. She was terrified she knew exactly what that something was. The breaking point came 3 months after the first meeting, on an evening that had seemed entirely ordinary. Thomas was asleep, Clara was reviewing patient files at her kitchen table, and Nathaniel was still there because dinner had run late and neither of them had acknowledged it was time for him to leave. He was telling her about the hotel development, the project that had brought him to this mountain town in the first place. The property he had initially been scouting had fallen through, but he had found an alternative site. Construction was scheduled to begin in spring. You are really moving forward with it, she said. The hotel. The headquarters relocation too. He set down his coffee cup. The board approved it last month. Pierce Hospitality will be running East Coast operations out of Boston starting in September. Clara looked up from her files. Boston is 3 hours from here. 90 minutes if I take the helicopter. But actually, I was thinking of establishing a permanent residence closer. The new hotel will need oversight during construction. The implications settled over her slowly. You are moving here. I am considering it. He met her eyes directly. I want to be part of Thomas's life, Clara. Really part of it. Not a weekend visitor who shows up with presents and disappears again. I want to be there for the ordinary moments. The homework help and the skinned knees and the bedtime stories. You are rearranging your entire company to be near a child you have known for 3 months. I am rearranging my entire life to be near the son I should have known from the beginning. The correction landed with weight. Clara felt her carefully maintained distance beginning to crack. This is not something you can just decide, Nathaniel. Why not? Because life is not that simple. Because Thomas has a routine, a stability, a world that does not include you as a permanent fixture. Because I spent 6 years building something you could not disrupt, and now you are dismantling it piece by piece just by showing up consistently. The words tumbled out faster than she could filter them. Nathaniel listened without interrupting, his expression patient in a way that only made her angrier. How long? She heard her voice rising and could not stop it. How long until the next big acquisition requires your attention? How long until Thomas becomes an obligation instead of a joy? How long until history repeats itself and we are both left wondering what happened? You think I have not changed. I think change is easy when everything is going well. The test comes when it is not. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table, his grey eyes intent on hers. Last month, there was an opportunity to acquire a competing hotel chain. A deal worth billions. The kind of acquisition that would have defined my entire career. Clara waited. I turned it down. What? The due diligence required would have meant 4 months of constant travel. Meetings in Asia, Europe, South America. I would have missed Thomas's birthday. His first soccer practice. The school play he has been talking about for weeks. He paused. 2 years ago, I would not have hesitated. But 2 years ago, I did not know what I was missing. I did not know what actually mattered. She stared at him, trying to reconcile this admission with everything she thought she knew. You walked away from a deal worth billions. It was not a hard choice. He held her gaze. Thomas matters more than any acquisition. You matter more than any acquisition. I spent years building an empire that meant nothing because I had no one to share it with. I am not making that mistake again." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. The change she had been afraid to believe in was written in every choice he had made over the past 3 months. The meetings rescheduled, the calls ignored, the opportunities declined. All of it in service of proving something she had convinced herself he was incapable of proving. "Clara." His voice was gentle. "I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give. I know I have not earned back your trust. I know Thomas does not even know who I really am. But I am here, and I am staying, and I will keep proving myself until you believe me." She should have maintained her distance. Should have reinforced the boundaries that had kept her safe for 6 years. Instead, she heard herself ask the question she had been avoiding. Why? After everything, after all this time, why does it matter so much? "Because I loved you." The words came out raw, unpolished. "Because losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and I was too proud to admit it. Because I searched for you for 3 years and told myself it was about closure when really it was about hope. And because that little boy asleep down the hall is the best thing I never knew I had, and I will spend the rest of my life making up for the years I was not there." Clara felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "You cannot just say things like that." "I can. I am." He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "I know you moved on. I know you married someone else, built a life without me. And I am not asking you to forget any of that. I am just asking for a chance to be present now. For Thomas. And maybe, someday, for you." The words hung between them, weighted with 6 years of separation and 3 months of gradual reconnect. Clara looked at his hand, so close to hers, and remembered what it had felt like to trust him. To believe in the future they were building together. To wake up every morning certain she knew what their life would look like. She had been wrong then. She might be wrong now. But Thomas asked about him on the days he did not visit. Thomas saved drawings to show him, stories to share with him. Thomas had started calling him by name with the casual possession of a child who expected someone to stay. And Clara, despite every instinct that told her to protect herself, had started to feel something she had not felt since Henry. Hope. "We should tell him soon," she said finally. "Tell him what?" "The truth. Who you are. What you are to him." Nathaniel's breath caught audibly. "You mean that? He deserves to know his father." She met his eyes. "And you have earned the right to be known." The smile that broke across his face was like watching the sun emerge from behind clouds. For a moment, he looked impossibly young, impossibly hopeful, nothing like the controlled CEO she had encountered in her clinic 3 months ago. "Thank you," he said. "Clara." "Thank you." She nodded, not trusting her voice. What he did not know, what she had not yet found the words to tell him, was that Thomas was not the only truth she had been keeping. That somewhere in the past 3 months, between the museum visits and the late-night messages, between watching him choose their son over billion-dollar deals, between remembering who he used to be and discovering who he had become, she had started to fall in love with him all over again. And that terrified her more than anything. The night before the planned revelation, Clara could not sleep. She moved through the dark house like a ghost, checking on Thomas, straightening already straight pillows, staring out windows at mountains she could not see. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, her son would learn that the kind man who had been visiting for 3 months was actually his father. Tomorrow, the careful architecture of their small family would shift to accommodate a third member. She was standing at the kitchen window when her phone buzzed with a message. "Are you awake?" It was 2 in the morning. Of course Nathaniel was awake too. "I cannot sleep," she typed back. "Neither can I. I keep imagining what he will say. How he will react. Whether he will understand." Clara leaned against the counter, phone glowing in her hands. Children are resilient. More than we give them credit for. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I am terrified, Clara. Not of the conversation. Of everything after. What if I fail him? What if all my good intentions are not enough? What if I turn into my father after all?" She read the message twice, feeling the vulnerability beneath the words. The man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals was lying awake at 2 in the morning, afraid he would not be good enough for a 5-year-old. "You will not fail him," She typed the words before she could second-guess them. I have watched you with him for 3 months. You put him first. Consistently. That is what matters. His response came quickly. You really believe that? I believe you have become someone I did not think you could become. Someone I was afraid to let myself hope for. The admission hung in the digital space between them. Clara stared at her own words, surprised by their honesty. Clara. His next message was just her name. Then another followed. When this is over. When Thomas knows the truth and things have settled. Can we talk? About us. About what might still be possible. Her heart was pounding in the quiet kitchen. I think we have to, she typed back. I think there are things I need to tell you too. Good things? She thought about the way his laugh had started to feel like home. The way her stomach flipped when his name appeared on her phone. The way she had caught herself imagining futures she had sworn she would never imagine again. I think so, she wrote. But it is complicated. Life is complicated. His response came immediately. Love is complicated. That does not mean it is not worth fighting for. She set the phone down, her hands trembling slightly. Tomorrow would change everything. The truth about Thomas, the truth about her feelings, the truth about what 6 years apart had taught them both. She walked back to her bedroom, checked on Thomas one more time, and finally allowed herself to close her eyes. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it. They would face it together. The morning dawned grey and cold, clouds heavy with promised snow. Clara dressed Thomas in his favorite blue sweater, the one that matched his eyes, and tried to keep her voice steady as she explained they were taking a special trip today. Where are we going? The Nature Reserve. Your favorite overlook. Is Nathaniel coming? She hesitated only a moment. Yes, sweetheart. Nathaniel is coming too. Thomas accepted this with his usual seriousness. He had stopped questioning Nathaniel's presence weeks ago, had folded it into the fabric of his ordinary life. What he did not know, could not know, was that this ordinary life was about to become something else entirely. They met Nathaniel at the trailhead. He was already waiting, dressed in practical clothes for hiking, his face pale despite the cold. He crouched down to greet Thomas, but Clara could see the tremor in his hands. Ready for an adventure? He asked. Thomas nodded. Mom said we are taking a special trip. That is right. Nathaniel glanced up at Clara. A very special trip. They hiked in near silence, the only sounds the crunch of their boots on the frozen trail and Thomas's occasional observations about birds and trees and interesting rocks. Clara walked behind them, watching Nathaniel match his pace to her son's shorter stride, watching him point out animal tracks and help Thomas over rough patches. By the time they reached the overlook, the clouds had begun to part, revealing glimpses of the valley below. Thomas ran to the weathered bench that marked his favorite spot, claiming it with the territorial pride of childhood. I can see our whole town from here, he announced. Clara and Nathaniel exchanged glances, then moved to join him. Thomas, Clara began, sitting on one side of him while Nathaniel took the other. We want to talk to you about something important. The shift in her tone was immediate. Thomas straightened, his small face alert. Did I do something wrong? Not at all. Nathaniel's voice was gentle. This is something good. Something wonderful, actually. Something we have wanted to tell you for a while. Clara took a breath, drawing on every reserve of courage she possessed. You know how I told you that your father loved you but could not be with us? Thomas nodded, his grey eyes serious. That was not entirely true, sweetheart. She felt the words catching in her throat. Your father did not know about you. I never told him you existed. Thomas processed this, his brow furrowing. He did not know about me. No. And that was my mistake. I should have told him. The silence stretched. Then Thomas turned to Nathaniel, and Clara watched the realization move across his face. Slow. Deliberate. A puzzle piece sliding into place. You are my father. It was not a question. Nathaniel's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he nodded, unable to speak. That is why your eyes are the same as mine, Thomas said, the words thoughtful rather than accusatory. I wondered about that. Yes. Nathaniel found his voice. That is why. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the valley, then back at Nathaniel, then at Clara. Did you not want him to be my father? The question cut straight to Clara's heart. I was scared, she admitted. I was scared he would not be able to take care of you the way you deserved. The way your father, Henry, took care of you. Thomas considered this with the weight he gave all serious matters. But he has been taking care of me. He comes to my school and he knows my favorite foods and he listens when I talk about dinosaurs even when it is boring. A laugh escaped Nathaniel, wet with tears. It is never boring. Thomas turned to face him fully, and in that moment, Clara saw her son making a decision. Weighing the evidence. Choosing his path. Are you going to stay? The question that had haunted them all. Forever, Nathaniel said, his voice cracking. I promise. I am never going anywhere. Pinky promise. Nathaniel extended his little finger, and Thomas linked his own with it, the binding contract of childhood sealing what no legal document could. Okay, Thomas said simply. Then he looked at Clara. Can we finish the hike now? I want to show Dad the place where we saw the fox. The word landed like a bomb, quiet and devastating. Dad. Not Nathaniel. Dad. Clara looked at Nathaniel, who was staring at their son as if he had just witnessed a miracle. Which, in a way, he had. Of course, sweetheart, she managed. Lead the way. Thomas bounded ahead, already pointing out the spot where they had seen the fox last autumn. Nathaniel stood frozen for a moment, then turned to Clara. He called me Dad. I know. He called me Dad. She reached out, touching his arm, feeling him tremble beneath her fingers. He knows what he wants, she said. He always has. Nathaniel looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw everything he was feeling written across his face. Gratitude and wonder and love and fear, all tangled together. Thank you, he whispered. For giving me this. For letting me prove myself. For not giving up on me when I had given you every reason to. She did not answer with words. Instead, she took his hand and held it, and together they followed their son up the mountain. The path ahead was uncertain. The integration of their fractured family would take time, patience, countless difficult conversations. There were still truths she had not told him, feelings she had not confessed, futures she was afraid to imagine. But watching Thomas show Nathaniel his favorite spots, hearing him casually drop the word Dad into sentences as if he had been using it his whole life, Clara felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since Henry died. She felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The snow began falling softly as they hiked back toward the car, blanketing the world in white. Thomas caught snowflakes on his tongue and demanded that both parents do the same. For a few perfect moments, they were just a family in the snow, laughing at nothing, together. Whatever came next, they would face it. All three of them. But first, they had a long road to walk. And some truths, once revealed, could not be taken back. The first week after the revelation passed in a blur of small adjustments and quiet observations. Thomas had accepted the truth with the remarkable resilience children possess, folding the knowledge of his biological father into his understanding of the world with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. But acceptance and integration were different things, and Clara watched her son navigate the distance between them with a mixture of pride and heartache. Mom. Thomas was sitting at the breakfast table, his spoon paused halfway to his mouth, his grey eyes serious. If Nathaniel is my real dad, what was Daddy? The question Clara had been dreading since the moment they told him. She set down her coffee cup and moved to sit beside him, choosing her words with care. Henry was your first daddy. He loved you from the moment you were born. He chose to be your father, and that choice was the most important thing in the world to him. But he was not my real dad. Real is a complicated word. Sweetheart. Clara reached out to smooth his hair. Henry was real in every way that mattered. He held you when you cried. He taught you to walk. He read you stories every night. That love was as real as anything in this world. Thomas considered this, his spoon still suspended. So I have two dads. You have two dads. One who is watching over you from heaven, and one who is here now. The simplicity of childhood logic worked its magic. Thomas nodded, apparently satisfied, and returned to his cereal with renewed focus. Can Nathaniel come for dinner tonight? I want to show him my new dinosaur book. Clara felt the shift happening, the gradual expansion of their small family to include a third member. It was terrifying and beautiful and completely beyond her control. "I will ask him," she said. Nathaniel arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine for Clara and a small wrapped package for Thomas. Inside was a wooden train, old and weathered, clearly antique. "This was mine when I was your age," he explained as Thomas turned it over in his hands. "My grandfather carved it for me. I thought you might like to have it." Thomas studied the train with the serious attention he gave all important objects. "It is very old. Very old." Nathaniel crouched down to his level. "I used to sleep with it every night. It made me feel safe. Like my horse. Like your horse." Thomas looked up at him, and Clara saw something pass between them. Recognition, perhaps. The understanding that they were made of the same material, shaped by the same patterns. "Thank you," Thomas said finally. "I will take good care of it." That night, after Thomas was asleep with both the wooden train and his stuffed horse tucked beside him, Clara and Nathaniel sat in her small living room with the wine he had brought. "He called me Dad again," Nathaniel said quietly. "Twice. Once at dinner and once when I was helping him brush his teeth." "How did that feel?" "Like nothing I have ever experienced." He stared into his wine glass. "Like every choice I made to be here was worth it. Like maybe I'm not going to fail at this after all." "You are not going to fail." He looked up at her, and she saw the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. "How can you be sure?" "Because I have watched you for 3 months. Because you turned down a $1 billion deal to attend a school concert. Because my son asked for you every day you were not here, and that does not happen unless someone has earned it." The words hung between them, weighted with everything they had not yet said. "Clara." His voice was rough. "I need to tell you something." She waited. "I am not just staying for Thomas." He set down his wine glass, his hands clasped between his knees. "I mean, he is the primary reason." "Of course he is. But there is another reason too." Her heart was pounding, though she kept her expression neutral. "I am staying for you." The admission filled the quiet room. "I know I have no right to say that," he continued. "I know you built a life without me, loved someone else, moved on in every way that matters. But I cannot pretend any more that my feelings are purely paternal. I watch you with Thomas and I remember why I fell in love with you. I see who you have become and I fall in love with you all over again. Every single day." "Nathaniel, I am not asking for anything." His voice was urgent. "I am not pressuring you. I just needed you to know. Because if there is even the smallest chance, someday, that you might feel the same way, I wanted you to know that I am here. Waiting. For as long as it takes." Clara stared at him, feeling the wall she had built beginning to crumble. "It has been 6 years," she said finally. "I know. I married someone else. I loved someone else. I know that too. And you think we can just pick up where we left off?" "No." He leaned forward, his grey eyes intent. "I think we can start something new. Something better. Built on who we are now, not who we were then." The honesty in his voice was undeniable. The man sitting across from her was not the distracted workaholic she had fled. He was someone who had looked at his life, found it wanting, and chosen to change. But was change enough? Could 6 years of growth erase the patterns that had driven them apart? "I need time," she said. "Take all the time you need. I need to see you keep choosing this. Thomas, this town, this life. Not for weeks or months, but for years. I will. And I need to figure out what I feel. Because right now, everything is tangled up together. The past and the present. What we had and what we lost. What Thomas needs and what I might want." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "I understand." "Do you?" He reached across the space between them, his hand stopping just short of hers. "I understand that trust is earned, not given. I understand that I broke something between us that may never fully heal. I understand that you have every reason to doubt me and no reason to believe me." He held her gaze. "But I also understand that I love you. That I never stopped loving you. And that I will spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of a second chance, whether you give me one or not." She looked at his hand, so close to hers. "And if I never give you that chance, then I will still be here. For Thomas. For whatever friendship you are willing to offer. Because being in your life in any capacity is better than not being in it at all. The raw honesty of the admission undid something in her chest. She had expected pressure, negotiation, the strategic maneuvering that had characterized his business dealings. Instead, she got surrender. Complete and unconditional. She did not reach for his hand. Not yet. But she did not pull away either. The weeks following the revelation brought challenges Clara had not anticipated. Thomas began testing boundaries in ways he never had before. Tantrums over minor frustrations. Refusal to follow bedtime routines. Demands for Nathaniel's presence at times when it was not possible. I want Dad to take me to school. Dad has a meeting this morning. Sweetheart. I will take you. I do not want you. I want Dad. The words stung more than Clara wanted to admit. She understood what was happening, had read enough about child psychology to recognize regression as a response to major life changes. But understanding did not make it hurt less. Nathaniel, to his credit, handled it with more grace than she expected. Your mom takes you to school because she loves you, he told Thomas during one of these episodes. And I need you to be kind to her, even when you are feeling upset. We are a team now. All three of us. That means we treat each other with respect. But I want you. I know. And I want to be with you too. Every minute of every day. But sometimes we have responsibilities that take us away from the people we love. That does not mean we love them any less. Thomas considered this, his small face working through the logic. Do you have responsibilities that take you away from me? Sometimes. But I always come back. And I always will. The storm passed, as storms do. Thomas hugged Clara and apologized for being mean. They went to school together, and by afternoon, the crisis was forgotten. But that night, after Thomas was asleep, Clara found herself crying in the kitchen. Silent tears that she could not quite explain. A knock at the back door made her jump. Nathaniel stood on the porch, snow in his hair, concern on his face. I saw your light on. I wanted to check that everything was okay. She wiped her eyes hastily, embarrassed to be caught in a moment of weakness. I am fine. Just tired. He stepped inside without being invited, closing the door against the cold. You have been crying. It is nothing. Clara. He said her name with a gentleness that threatened to undo her completely. What is wrong? She turned away, facing the window, unable to look at him. He wanted you this morning. Not me. After 5 years of being everything to him, he wanted you. And that hurt. Of course it hurt. She heard the bitterness in her own voice. I know it is irrational. I know it is just a phase. But for 5 years, I was his whole world. And now I have to share him with someone he has known for 3 months. The silence stretched behind her. Then she felt him move closer, not quite touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. You are not losing him, Clara. You are gaining help. Someone else who loves him. Someone else who will be there for the hard parts, not just the easy ones. It does not feel that way. I know. He paused. But I want you to know something. Every time he asks for me, every time he calls me Dad, I think about you. About what you gave him for 5 years when I was not there. About the stability and love and security that made him the extraordinary child he is. I am not replacing you. I am building on the foundation you created. She turned to face him, tears still wet on her cheeks. You are not supposed to say the right thing. It would be easier if you were still the person I left. Sorry to disappoint you. The ghost of a smile touched her lips despite herself. How did you know to come here tonight? I did not. He shrugged. I saw your kitchen light and I felt like something was wrong. So I walked over. At 10 o'clock at night. In the snow. You were crying. The time and weather seemed less important. She studied him, this man who had once been incapable of noticing her distress when they lived in the same apartment. The man who now walked through snow at 10 o'clock because he sensed something was wrong. You really have changed. I told you I had. I did not believe you. And now. She was quiet for a long moment. Now I am starting to. She made tea instead of opening wine. They sat at the kitchen table and talked about Thomas, about the challenges ahead, about how to navigate this new configuration of their family. It was practical and grounded and exactly what she needed. When he left, close to midnight, he paused at the door. "I meant what I said. About being here. About waiting. But I also want you to know that I see what you are giving up by letting me in. The control you had. The certainty of knowing exactly how your life would unfold. I do not take that lightly." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good night, Clara. Good night." She watched him walk through the snow toward his car, and for the first time since he had reappeared in her life, she allowed herself to imagine a future where he stayed. Spring arrived slowly in the mountains, snow giving way to mud, bare branches tentatively budding with new growth. Thomas's 6th birthday approached, and with it came decisions that would have seemed impossible just months before. "We should have a party," Thomas announced at breakfast one morning. "With all my friends. And both my parents. Both your parents." Clara set down her coffee cup. "You and Dad." Thomas looked at her with the exasperated patience children reserve for adults who are being particularly slow. "I want you both there. Of course we will both be there. And I want a dinosaur cake. And a bouncy castle. And for everyone to come to Dad's house because it has a bigger yard." Clara blinked. "You want to have your party at Dad's house? He has a trampoline." The logic was unassailable. That evening, she called Nathaniel to discuss the request. "He wants to use your yard for his birthday party." "I heard." Nathaniel's voice carried a smile. "He called me this afternoon with a detailed proposal. Complete with a diagram he drew of where he wants the bouncy castle positioned." "Of course he did. I told him I needed to talk to you first. That we make decisions together." The simple statement carried more weight than he probably intended. "We make decisions together." As if they were already the partnership Thomas assumed them to be. "I think it is fine," she said. "If you are comfortable hosting. I would be honored." A pause. "Clara, I was thinking. My parents would love to meet Thomas. They have been asking since I told them about him. Would it be too much if they came for the party?" His parents. Another expansion of Thomas's world, another set of relationships to navigate. "They know about him. I told them after we told Thomas. My mother cried for an hour. She has been sending care packages ever since. I have been storing them at my place because I was not sure if you were ready." The image of an unknown grandmother carefully selecting gifts for a grandson she had never met made Clara's throat tight. "They should come," she said. "He deserves to know his family." "Thank you." The relief in his voice was palpable. "I will tell them to book flights." The birthday party was a controlled chaos of children and cake and an enormous bouncy castle that Thomas had designed himself. Clara watched Nathaniel's parents interact with their grandson for the first time, saw the resemblance between Thomas and his grandmother, noticed how naturally they all seemed to fit together. "He is just like you were at that age," Dorothy Pierce told her son, dabbing at her eyes. "The same intensity. The same determination. I would know he was yours even if no one told me." Nathaniel's father, a quiet man who had said little but observed everything, approached Clara near the end of the party. "I understand why you left him," he said without preamble. "I was the same way at his age. Driven. Obsessed. Certain that success would fill whatever hole I was trying to fill." He looked at his son, who was helping Thomas open presents. "It took me years to realize what I was sacrificing. By then, most of the damage was done. He has a chance to do better. I think he is taking it." Clara did not know how to respond. The admission was too honest, too raw, too close to everything she had been thinking. "He has changed," she said finally. "I did not think it was possible, but he has. That is because of you. And that boy. He has something to fight for now. Something more important than money or success or proving himself." He shook his head slowly. "I wish I had figured that out sooner. Maybe things would have been different." He walked away before she could answer, leaving her with the weight of generations of patterns, some broken and some continuing, all of them converging in the small boy currently covered in cake frosting. That night, after the guests had gone and Thomas was asleep in his room at Nathaniel's house, too exhausted to make the drive home, Clara found herself standing on the back porch, staring at the mountains in the fading light. Nathaniel joined her, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. Successful party. He declared it the best birthday ever. 3 times. High praise from a 6-year-old. They stood in comfortable silence, the evening cooling around them. Your father said something to me today, Clara said finally. I saw you talking. I was afraid to ask what about. He said you have a chance to do better than he did. That you are taking it. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. He and I did not speak for almost 5 years after my mother's depression got bad. He was so consumed by work that he did not notice what was happening to her. By the time he did, she had nearly taken her own life. He exhaled slowly. I blamed him for a long time. Then I looked at my own life and realized I was becoming exactly like him. What made you realize? Losing you. Almost losing everything. Sitting in that hotel room in Geneva and understanding that I had spent my entire adult life trying to avoid my father's mistakes while making entirely new ones. Clara turned to look at him. The evening light softened his features, made him look younger, closer to the man she had fallen in love with. I never knew any of that. About your mother. I never told you. He met her eyes. I was too proud. Too determined to project strength. I thought vulnerability was weakness, and weakness was what had destroyed my father. What do you think now? Now I think vulnerability is the only thing that makes us real. He held her gaze. Hiding from it just means you suffer alone. The honesty of the admission hung between them. Clara thought about all the things she had hidden during their relationship, all the fears she had never voiced because she was too afraid of appearing needy. I was afraid to tell you I was unhappy, she said. I thought if I pushed too hard, you would leave. So I stayed quiet and resentful until leaving seemed like the only option. We were both so young. So certain we knew how love was supposed to work. And now I know love requires more than passion. It requires presence, patience, the willingness to show up even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. She set down her wine glass, turning to face him fully. Nathaniel. Yes. I need to tell you something. He waited, his expression open, patient. I have been falling in love with you again. She watched his face change, saw hope and fear and joy flicker across his features. I did not want to. I tried not to. But somewhere between the museum visits and the late-night texts and watching you choose Thomas over billion-dollar deals, I stopped being able to pretend I did not feel it. Clara. Her name came out rough, broken. I am not ready for anything official. I am not ready for labels or commitments or grand declarations. But I wanted you to know. Because you have been honest with me, and I owed you the same. He set down his own glass with careful deliberation. Can I hold your hand? The simplicity of the request made her smile. Yes. His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and familiar and somehow new. I will wait, he said. For as long as you need. I will be here, and I will keep proving myself, and when you are ready for more, I will be ready too. She squeezed his hand, feeling something loosen in her chest. I know you will. They stood together as darkness fell over the mountains, hands linked, future uncertain but no longer feared. Behind them, their son slept peacefully, unaware of the quiet revolution taking place on the back porch. Some things, Clara thought, could not be rushed. Some things had to unfold in their own time, at their own pace, according to their own logic. This was one of those things. And for the first time in 6 years, she was willing to wait and see where it led. The summer passed in a haze of shared activities and gradual integration. Thomas moved fluidly between his mother's apartment and his father's house, accumulating toys and books and memories in both locations. Clara and Nathaniel established routines that worked for all three of them, compromising on bedtimes and screen limits and the endless negotiations that came with co-parenting. They had their first real fight in August, over something so small Clara could barely remember it afterward. Something about pickup schedules and miscommunication and the accumulated stress of trying to build a family from fractured pieces. Nathaniel raised his voice. Clara raised hers in response. Thomas, playing in the next room, went very quiet. The silence snapped them both back to awareness. We are scaring him, Clara said, her anger draining away. I know. Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair. I am sorry. I should not have. We need to be better about this. If we are going to disagree, we do it away from him. We do it calmly. We do not let our issues become his. Agreed. They found Thomas building a tower with his blocks, his small face carefully neutral. Hey, buddy. Nathaniel crouched beside him. Mom and I were having a disagreement. Sometimes grown-ups get frustrated and talk louder than they should. But we are not angry at each other. And we are definitely not angry at you. Thomas placed another block on his tower. My friend Marcus's parents yell all the time. He says it means they are getting divorced. Clara felt her heart clench. We are not getting divorced, sweetheart. We are not even married. But you might get married someday. Thomas looked up, his grey eyes too knowing for a 6-year-old. And then you might get divorced. Like Marcus's parents. Clara and Nathaniel exchanged glances over their son's head. Nathaniel sat down on the floor, pulling Thomas into his lap. Here is what I can promise you, he said. I am never going to leave. No matter what happens between your mom and me. I will always be your dad. I will always be here. Even if we argue sometimes. Even if things get hard. You will never lose me. Okay. Pinky promise. Nathaniel linked his finger with Thomas's. Pinky promise. Thomas studied him for a moment, then nodded and returned to his blocks. Later, after Thomas was in bed, Clara and Nathaniel sat on her couch in the kind of heavy silence that follows difficult conversations. He is afraid of losing people, Clara said. Because of Henry. Because he learned early that the people you love can disappear. We have to be careful. Nathaniel's voice was quiet. Whatever we do, whatever we become, we cannot let our relationship affect his security. I know. Which means we need to figure out what this is. He gestured between them. What we are doing. Where we are headed. Not for us, but for him. She knew he was right. The ambiguity that felt comfortable for two adults was confusing for a child trying to understand his place in the world. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting we make some decisions. He turned to face her. Either we commit to trying this, really trying, or we establish clear boundaries and remain co-parents only. But this middle ground, it is not fair to him. The ultimatum was gentler than it might have been, but it was an ultimatum nonetheless. And if I am not ready, then we are co-parents. Friends. People who share a child and nothing more. And I will respect that completely. But it is not what you want. No. He held her gaze. It is not what I want. But what I want matters less than what Thomas needs. If clear boundaries give him stability, then clear boundaries it is. Clara sat with the choice laid before her. The safe option, the one that protected her heart, was obvious. Draw the lines. Keep the distance. Raise their son together while living separate lives. But was safety the same as happiness? Was protection the same as peace? She thought about Henry, about the quiet contentment of their marriage, about the way she had settled for comfort over passion because passion had hurt too much. She thought about the life she had built, sturdy and predictable and completely under her control. She thought about the way Nathaniel looked at her when he thought she was not watching. The way his hand felt in hers. The way her heart lifted when his name appeared on her phone. I do not want boundaries, she said finally. Nathaniel's breath caught. I want to try. She met his eyes. Really try. Whatever that means. Whatever it requires. I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of protecting myself from things that might hurt when the alternative is missing out on things that might be wonderful. Clara. I love you. The words came out stronger than she expected. I have been trying not to. I have been fighting it since the moment you walked back into my life. But I love you. And I want to see what happens if I stop fighting. He moved toward her slowly, giving her time to retreat if she needed to. When she did not, he cupped her face in his hands with a tenderness that made her throat tight. I love you too, he said. I never stopped. Not for one day in 6 years. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the passionate encounters of their youth. It was softer, more deliberate, weighted with everything they had learned and lost and found again. It was, Clara thought, the beginning of something new. Fall brought changes that rippled through their newly configured family like stones dropped in still water. Nathaniel moved his remaining operations to the East Coast, closing the chapter of his life that had required constant travel. Clara reduced her hours at the clinic, bringing on a partner who could share the load. Thomas started first grade, proud of his new backpack and eager to show his father every worksheet and art project. And Clara, on a quiet October evening when the leaves were at their peak, removed her wedding ring for the first time since Henry's death. She did not throw it away or hide it. She placed it carefully in a memory box alongside photographs and letters and the hospital bracelet from Thomas's birth. A piece of the past, honored but no longer worn. "Are you sure?" Nathaniel asked when she told him. "Henry gave me 5 years of peace," she said. "He gave me Thomas. He gave me a foundation to build on when everything else had crumbled. I will always love him for that. But he is gone, and I am still here. And I think he would want me to keep living." Nathaniel did not try to fill the space with words. He simply held her hand and let her grieve, let her release, let her choose the future without forgetting the past. The first time Clara stayed overnight at Nathaniel's house, Thomas barely noticed. He had fallen asleep during a movie, and rather than wake him, they tucked him into the guest room that had become his second bedroom and let him sleep. "Should I go home?" Clara asked, hovering awkwardly in the hallway. "Stay." The single word carried weight. She stayed. Nothing happened that night except the simple intimacy of sleeping beside someone, of waking in the early morning to find a warm body next to hers. But it was enough. It was more than enough. It was the quiet reclamation of something she had thought lost forever. By winter, the overnight visits had become sleepovers, then weekends, then something that looked increasingly like cohabitation without the official label. The town talked, as small towns do. The veterinarian and the hotel developer. The single mother and the billionaire. The pair of them at school events and grocery stores, and the diner where Thomas still ordered the same pancakes every time. Clara waited for the whispers to bother her. They never did. She was happy. Actually, genuinely happy, in a way she had not been since before Henry got sick. Maybe ever. And for once, she was not afraid to admit it. Thomas turned 7 on a brilliant spring day, the mountains green and lush, the sky impossibly blue. A year had passed since the revelation that changed everything. A year of adjustment and growth and the slow weaving together of 3 separate lives. The party was smaller this time, by Thomas's request. Close friends and family only. Grandparents who had flown in from both coasts. A dinosaur cake shaped like a brachiosaurus because Thomas had decided it was the most elegant of the dinosaurs. After the cake was cut and the presents opened and the guests departed, Clara and Nathaniel sat on the back porch watching Thomas play with his new telescope. "The star finder you gave him is going to keep us up past bedtime for weeks," Clara said. "Worth it. Look at his face." Thomas was adjusting the lens with the serious concentration he brought to every important task. The light was golden, the evening warm, the moment crystalline in its perfection. "I have been thinking," Nathaniel said. "That sounds ominous." "It might be." He turned to face her. "About us. About what comes next." Clara felt her heart rate increase. "We have been doing this dance for a year now. Living together half the time. Raising Thomas together. Pretending we are not already a family because neither of us wants to be the first to say it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Clara's breath stopped. "I am not proposing." He opened the box to reveal not a ring, but a key. "Not yet. I know you are not ready for that, and honestly, I do not think I am either. We have only been back together for a year. We should probably wait longer." "Then what?" "I bought a house. The old Victorian on Maple Street. The one you showed Thomas last month, the one with the wraparound porch and the yard big enough for a dog." "You bought a house." "I bought a house that is big enough for all of us. With a room for Thomas and an office for you and a yard where he can stargaze without the streetlights getting in the way." He held out the key. "I am asking you to move in with me. Officially. No more splitting time between 2 places. 1 home. 1 family." Clara stared at the key, feeling the weight of the decision it represented. "What if it does not work? Then we figure it out." "But I am done planning for failure, Clara. I spent 6 years building an empire to protect myself from loss, and all it did was guarantee I would lose everything that mattered." He took her hand. "I would rather risk everything for the chance of something real than protect myself into another decade of emptiness." She looked at the key. At him. At their son across the yard, so absorbed in his telescope that he had no idea his world was about to change again. Thomas will need the room with the best window, she said. The one facing east. For morning light. Already planned. And we will need to discuss the dog situation. He has been lobbying for months. I was thinking a golden retriever. They are good with kids. You have thought about this. I have thought about nothing else for weeks. He searched her face. Is that a yes? She took the key from the box. That is a yes. His smile broke across his face like sunrise. That evening, they told Thomas together. How would you feel, Nathaniel asked, about all of us living in the same house? Thomas looked up from his telescope, his grey eyes thoughtful. Like a real family. Like a real family. Would I get a bigger room? Much bigger. And a dog. We are discussing it. Thomas considered for a moment. Then his face split into a grin. Okay. Children, Clara thought, had a remarkable ability to distill complicated situations into simple truths. A bigger room and a dog. That was all he needed to know. The rest, they would figure out together. The Victorian on Maple Street had been empty for nearly a decade. The previous owners had died without heirs, and the estate had languished on the market, too expensive for most buyers, too old-fashioned for developers. When Nathaniel found it, the bones were good but everything else needed work. They spent the summer renovating. Thomas helped choose paint colors and cabinet handles, taking the responsibility with the seriousness it deserved. Clara found herself caught up in decisions about lighting fixtures and countertops, surprised by how much she cared about the details of a home she was building with someone else. Henry had bought their apartment already furnished. She had never had the chance to create a space from scratch. This is different, she told Nathaniel one night, surrounded by fabric samples and tile options. Building something together instead of just moving into something that already exists. That is the point. They moved in on the first day of August, Thomas racing through the empty rooms with the joyful abandon of a child claiming new territory. By evening, they had assembled enough furniture to sleep on, though boxes still lined the hallways and picture frames sat propped against walls waiting to be hung. Their first night in the new house, Clara lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the old building settling. Beside her, Nathaniel slept peacefully. Down the hall, Thomas was curled in his new room with the east-facing windows, probably still too excited to rest. She thought about everything that had led to this moment. The choices she had made. The secrets she had kept. The man she had loved and lost and found again. It had not been a straight path. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But she was here now. They all were. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Fall arrived with the smell of apples and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot. Thomas started second grade, proud to report that his family situation was no longer confusing because he had a mom and a dad who lived in the same house like normal people. Normal, Clara thought. Such a strange word for something so hard-won. The golden retriever arrived in October, a puppy named Galileo because Thomas insisted on choosing a name that reflected his scientific interests. Training the dog became a family project, with varying degrees of success and endless comedy as Galileo chewed through shoes and learned that the cat next door was not a friend. Thanksgiving brought both sets of grandparents together for the first time. Clara's mother, who had maintained a careful neutrality about Nathaniel's reappearance, finally thawed over turkey and pie. He seems different from how you described him, she admitted while they washed dishes. Less intense. More present. He is different. I think losing everything he thought he wanted showed him what actually mattered. And you? Are you happy? Clara considered the question. I am terrified sometimes. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Wondering when he will get consumed by work again or when I will discover I have been fooling myself. But underneath that, yes. I am happy. Genuinely. Surprisingly happy. Her mother nodded slowly. Henry would be glad. He wanted you to keep living. He told me once, near the end, that his biggest worry was that you would close yourself off. That you would use his death as an excuse never to risk anything again. He said that. He knew you better than you think. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I miss him. You always will. Her mother squeezed her hand. But missing someone does not mean you cannot love someone else. The heart has room for more than one person. You taught Thomas that when you explained about his two dads. She had, Clara realized. She had given her son permission to love without limits, without hierarchies, without guilt. Maybe it was time to give herself the same permission. Christmas morning brought chaos and joy and wrapping paper everywhere. Thomas raced between presents while Galileo enthusiastically shredded whatever he could reach. Clara and Nathaniel sat together on the couch, coffee in hand, watching the scene with the bemused exhaustion of parents who had been up since dawn. "I have something for you," Nathaniel said, pulling a small box from behind a cushion. Clara felt her heart skip. "We said no expensive gifts." This was not expensive. He handed her the box. "But it is important." Inside was a photograph in a simple frame. Clara recognized it immediately. Henry, holding Thomas as a newborn, his face radiant with love. "Where did you get this?" "Your mother." I asked if she had any photos of Henry with Thomas. "Ones you might not have seen in a while." He watched her face carefully. "I know I cannot replace him. I would never try. But I wanted you to know that I see him as part of our family too. Part of what made Thomas who he is. Part of what made you who you are." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. "You did not have to do this. I wanted to." He took her hand. "I spent years being jealous of a dead man. Then I realized how stupid that was. He loved you. He loved Thomas. He gave you something I was not capable of giving at the time. I am grateful for that, not threatened by it." Clara looked at the photograph, at Henry's face, at the tiny version of Thomas nestled in his arms. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. And I think I am ready." "Ready for what?" "For whatever comes next. For official. For permanent. For all of it." Nathaniel's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something deeper. "Are you sure?" "I have been sure for months. I was just too scared to say it." She set down the photograph, turning to face him. "But I am tired of being scared. I am tired of protecting myself from joy because it might end someday. Everything ends eventually. That does not mean it is not worth having." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his chin resting on her hair. "Then we will have it," he said. "For as long as we can. However it looks." Thomas chose that moment to launch himself onto the couch between them, Galileo in hot pursuit. "Mom. Dad. Look what Grandma sent." The moment dissolved into laughter and the chaos of a family on Christmas morning. But Clara held onto it, stored it away, added it to the growing collection of memories that made up this new life she was building. Whatever came next, she was ready. 2.5 years after Nathaniel walked into Clara's veterinary clinic and saw the son he never knew he had, they married. The wedding was small, held in the backyard of the Victorian on Maple Street, with only close friends and family in attendance. Thomas served as ring-bearer, his face serious with the responsibility. Galileo wore a bow tie and somehow managed not to eat it. Clara's mother cried. Nathaniel's parents held hands through the entire ceremony. Thomas asked loudly when the cake was happening, drawing laughter from everyone. The vows were simple, written by both of them, focused on the promises that mattered. "I promise to choose you," Clara said. "Every day. Even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard." "I promise to be present," Nathaniel replied. "Not just physically, but completely. With all of me." They exchanged rings. They kissed. Thomas made a face and declared it gross. Afterward, as the sun set and the fairy lights came on and the music played, Clara found herself standing at the edge of the lawn, looking at the scene before her. Her husband dancing with their son. Her mother laughing with Dorothy Pierce over a joke she could not hear. Galileo attempting to steal food from the buffet table with remarkably poor stealth. "This," she thought. "This is what I was afraid of. This is what I almost missed." She thought about the choices she had made. Leaving Nathaniel when she discovered she was pregnant. Keeping Thomas a secret. Building a life designed to protect them both from a pain she had assumed was inevitable. She had been right about some things. The man Nathaniel was back then would not have been a good father. He would not have been capable of this, of choosing a backyard wedding over a destination event, of dancing with his son instead of checking his phone. But she had also been wrong. Wrong to assume he could not change. Wrong to decide for him what he was capable of. Wrong to deny Thomas his father out of fear. The cost of those choices was impossible to calculate. Years lost. Milestones missed. A father and son who would always have a gap in their story that could never be filled. But here they were anyway. Imperfect and complicated and somehow whole. Penny, for your thoughts. Nathaniel appeared beside her, slightly breathless from dancing. I was thinking about all the things I got wrong, she said. And how grateful I am that we ended up here anyway. He took her hand, following her gaze to the party in front of them. I used to think I had everything figured out, he said. Build the company. Acquire the properties. Measure success in dollars and deals. Then I lost you, and I realized I did not understand anything at all. What do you understand now? That success is not about what you accumulate. It is about what you keep. He squeezed her hand. And I am never letting go of this. Any of it. Thomas came running over, Galileo at his heels. Mom. Dad. They are cutting the cake. Come on. He grabbed both their hands and pulled, his urgency making them laugh. All right, all right. Clara allowed herself to be dragged toward the cake table. We are coming. The cake was chocolate, Thomas's favorite. They cut it together, the three of them, because Thomas insisted on being part of every important moment. As she ate her slice, surrounded by the people she loved, Clara thought about the story they had created. A story of mistakes and consequences. Of separation and return. Of fear and courage and the slow, painful work of building trust. It was not a fairy tale. There had been no villains to defeat, no dramatic confrontations, no easy resolutions. Just two imperfect people learning to do better. To be better. To choose each other and their son over everything else. That was the real story, she realized. Not the secret or the discovery or the revelation. But what came after? The ordinary days strung together into months and years. The small choices that added up to something larger than any of them. A family, built from broken pieces, stronger for having been repaired. 5 years after that first encounter in the veterinary clinic, Clara stood in the same spot where Nathaniel had frozen upon seeing his son for the first time. The clinic had expanded now, a second examination room added, a full surgical suite installed. Her partner handled the routine cases while Clara focused on the complicated ones. Thomas was 10, brilliant and serious, and surprisingly kind. He had his father's intensity and his mother's empathy, a combination that made him remarkable and occasionally exhausting. Nathaniel's company continued to thrive, though he had restructured it completely. Most operations ran without him. He worked from home more often than not, available for school pickups and soccer games and the endless homework help that 5th grade demanded. They had built something, the three of them. Something that looked nothing like what Clara had imagined when she was 27 and pregnant and afraid. Something better. Mom. Thomas appeared in the clinic doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. School had ended an hour ago, and Nathaniel had picked him up as usual. Hey, sweetheart. How was your day? Good. We learned about the space program. I want to be an astronaut. Last week it was a marine biologist. I can be both. She smiled. Yes, you can. Dad says dinner is almost ready. He sent me to get you. Clara looked at the patient files on her desk, the endless work that never quite finished. Then she looked at her son, waiting patiently in the doorway. She set down the files. Let me grab my coat. They walked home together through the autumn evening, Thomas chattering about space missions and ocean depths and all the things he planned to accomplish. Clara listened, contributing where appropriate, mostly just enjoying the sound of his voice. The Victorian on Maple Street glowed warm and welcoming in the dusk. Through the windows, she could see Nathaniel moving around the kitchen, Galileo underfoot as always. Home. She thought about the woman she had been when she ran from Boston. Scared. Defensive. So certain she knew what was best for everyone. She had made choices from that fear, and those choices had cost them all. But she had also been brave, in her way. Brave enough to build a life alone. Brave enough to let Nathaniel back in when he returned. Brave enough to trust again when trust had been so badly broken. Maybe that was the lesson. Not that fear was bad, but that it could not be the final word. That you could feel afraid and still choose connection. Choose vulnerability. Choose love. They reached the front door, and Thomas bounded ahead, already calling for his father. Clara paused on the porch for a moment, looking at the life framed in the windows before her. She had not gotten everything right. No one did. But she had gotten here. To this house, this family, this imperfect and beautiful life. That was enough. That was more than enough. She opened the door and stepped inside. Some stories do not end with grand revelations or dramatic confrontations. Some stories end quietly, in the ordinary moments that make up a life. A family dinner on an autumn evening. A child's laughter echoing through a home. Two people who once hurt each other learning, day by day, to love each other better. This is that kind of story. It is the story of a woman who made hard choices and lived with the consequences. It is the story of a man who lost everything and found his way back. It is the story of a child who deserved the truth and received it with more grace than any adult could have managed. Most of all, it is a story about second chances. About the possibility that we can change, that we can grow, that we can become better versions of ourselves if we are willing to do the work. Not everyone gets a second chance. Not everyone deserves one. But for those who do, for those who are brave enough to take it and humble enough to earn it, there is hope. There is always hope. Thank you for joining me for this story. If it touched your heart, if it made you think about your own choices and second chances, I hope you will share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember that it is never too late to rebuild. Never too late to reconnect. Never too late to become the person you wish you had been all along. Until next time, this is Tales of Desire with Mr. Walker, reminding you that the greatest love stories are not about perfection. They are about persistence. They are about showing up. They are about choosing each other again and again, until choosing becomes as natural as breathing. That is the love worth fighting for. That is the love worth waiting for. That is the love that lasts.